And now, it's Boomer Life, lifestyle discussion designed to make your life more engaging, meaningful, and complete. Celebrating the baby boomer generation, this is Boomer Life on CIL 650.
Well, good evening and welcome to Boomer Life here on CIL 650. Sterling Fox with you on this eve of St. Patrick's Day, joined in studio by the Director of Clinical Services from JerichoCounselling. Dawn Schooler is back with us. Nice to see you again.
Great to see you.
Schooler doesn't suggest any Irish heritage, though. Are you anxious when it comes to March 17th? Do you try and go out and drink green beer and do all that quasi-Irish stuff, or you just take a flying pass?
Well, I wouldn't be a great therapist if I struggled with anxiety around St. Patrick's Day, now would I?
That's why I asked you.
Sure.
So you've sorted it all out, have you?
Mostly.
Tell us a little bit about JerichoCounselling. 3 locations in town. There's Metrotown in Burnaby, there's West Broadway, and Cole Harbour, right?
That's right.
Okay, which of those was first?
The Burnaby location was first, in fact, in 2001.
And it has grown to 3 locations from 1 in 13, 14 years.
Yes. And
that would simply be a demand issue, Dawn?
Yes, two things. One is the demand issue, but the other is really fueled by my passion about delivering and making available counseling services for as many people as would want it and need it.
Right. Why do so many of us sort of balk at the notion even of submitting ourselves to a counselor? What is up with that?
There's still a tremendous stigma attached to reaching out for help, kind of whatever kind of help, but certainly for counseling help and help for mental problems. It's still pretty scary for a lot of people.
It's interesting, though, because when young people go to get married, frequently parents, and in many cases the padre, will suggest a little marriage counseling, a little get-to-know-you session or 3 before all of that happens. It's okay when there's a traumatic event in a school. The school board will send in grief counselors, and we're happy to see them there to help our kids along. So some counselors are okay as long as it's for what? Other people?
Well, and I think it is when it's okay for other people. I often joke with folks and say, well, you might not need us, but I bet you know someone that does.
Sure.
But the other part of it is very often we don't reach out for help until things are awful or until it's bad enough. And that's the other part of what we're doing, is trying to reach people and say, it doesn't have to be awful to get a little bit of help and coaching.
Now, has it helped a little, Dawn, over the years that in the corporate sector, there has been some recognition by some companies that they do impose a lot of stress on their employees, and sometimes it doesn't work out all that well, and they're kind of responsible for it and have contributed to the well-being of those stressed-out employees by providing them access to counseling?
Yeah, I think that, businesses are often driven by the obvious, the bottom line.
Sure.
And when you create a work environment where there's too much stress and you contribute then to absenteeism, low morale, high distractibility, you don't do as well as a business. So there's been a pretty significant sort of turn, if you will, of people saying, if we lighten up, we get a little help, a little coaching, things can improve in the business for sure.
Now, you've been a coach in the past. You're a counselor in your present. Yeah. Do you find the semantics make a difference? Do you find that if someone solicits a little coaching assistance as opposed to an actual counseling session, do people approach you like that, looking for coaching rather than counseling?
Well, sure. We might have a listener or two remembers sneaking a veggie in with a pancake now and then, and the kid didn't know what was happening.
That's right.
And so if we can take a coaching position and go, coaching, yeah, good for me, and you sneak a little bit of self-esteem work and communication in there, it makes a big difference.
But you've been a counselor for quite a long time, and you've devoted a lot of your time and energy over these past years to trying very hard to reduce, not eliminate, that would be an impossible mission, but to reduce the level of stigmatization that comes with a person seeking professional help.
Yes.
Because that's still taboo.
Well, it truly is taboo, and again, I think it's slowly changing for sure. But we've got a long way to go. The province of British Columbia, I think, is doing a very good job these days at moving mental health forward, and the idea of reaching out different populations. Although they're still really strapped with the sort of the most seriously ill of our population and folks who don't have financial resources necessarily to get their own help. So the province is really overburdened, if you will, but
Right.
more and more people are talking more comfortably about, well, go check out a place like Jericho Counselling.
Sure.
Go do a session or two. You really don't have a lot to lose if you give it a try. But
Right.
still, yeah, the stigma, it's the thing we hear so often. Wow, that wasn't awful. I wish I'd done that sooner.
Almost surprised
Really
at how
surprised.
smoothly the process went.
Yeah. And so again, the what we really try to do is people are scared of being judged.
Right.
Like, oh, you don't know this? We just believe everybody comes in as an equal and go, wow, if you're not, I think if you're not good at something or you're not coping very well, there is a perfectly reasonable explanation for it. Let's figure out what it is, build the skills you need, and off you go.
Now, when you finally reach that crossroads in your life where you are comfortable with yourself going, you know, I could use a little coaching. I could use a little professional input here because it's getting pretty weird and fuzzy, and I would like to sit down before it gets too strange. So they've heard you on the radio, and they think you're a pretty decent human being and would probably lend a sympathetic ear and some good advice. So what happens? They pick up the phone, they go to the website, they go to JerichoCounselling.com, and they find the phone number, the addresses of all the 3 locations and all of that. So they make a phone call. What's going to happen?
Well, first you're going to be greeted by a wonderfully friendly voice that says, you know, good afternoon, Jericho Counselling. And then really we're going to work with you to find out, you know, is daytime, evening, weekend most convenient for you? Are you looking to meet with a male or a female preferred? Are you interested in seeing an intern who has perhaps less experience, but they're much less expensive? Are you looking for someone who's got a PhD? What are you looking for? And then where do you want to go? And then we're going to book you an appointment we recommend people book a free 30-minute consultation to get started.
Okay.
Which is truly a meet and greet sort of experience. Research shows that the single most important contributing factor to a successful outcome in counseling is the relationship between the counselor and the client.
You'd have to think so.
Right.
Yeah.
Truly, counseling is hard, learning is hard, making change is hard. And so if you have to then work at getting one another and the nuances of communication too, it's a pretty uphill battle. So we want to get the fit right. So we invite people in, no charge other than your time.
Sure.
Come in, and we have people meet 2 or 3 folks before they make a decision.
Until they find the right connection.
Yeah. And then the other thing that we don't do, you will notice if you make a call to us, is we don't need to know or even want to know your story.
I was just going to say that. So how far into the call before somebody says, so what's your problem anyway?
Right.
That's not going to happen, is it?
No, certainly callers are welcome to volunteer, you know, that I'm struggling with, I just lost a parent, for instance,
Sure.
or I'm worried about my son's marriage, or whatever it is that they might be worried about. They're welcome to volunteer that.
Sure.
And then we weave that into the matching process. But we won't ask people why they're coming, because that, for us, it's a very precious and private sort of story, and we don't want folks telling their story until they find a place that they want to tell the whole story. We don't like it that they have to tell their story over and over.
And I think what you've already mentioned, a very key component to the welcoming that one receives at Jericho Counselling, and that's the non-judgmental aspect of the welcome. You're not going to get a finger-wagging lecture. You're not going to get scolded for being a bad person.
No.
Or any of that stuff that you anticipate is most likely to happen is least likely to happen. In fact, is unlikely to happen, right?
In fact, if it did, and I got wind of it as the owner of Jericho Counselling, there would be some trouble, and it wouldn't be with the client.
Right.
I can assure you of that.
Right. Well, and
it
people,
just wouldn't happen.
But people, you know, you find ways, Dawn. You find ways to avoid the inevitable, which is I need to sit down with someone who understands where my head is at these days. I barely understand it myself, and yet I'm not willing to just go talk to anybody, and I'm really afraid that I'm going to get some kind of terrible lecture, and I'm going to be thought of as some kind of lesser mortal because I have issues.
Yes.
Well, it's 2015. Who doesn't have issues?
Well, yes. If someone's telling you they don't, I might look at you and go, I'm not sure you're telling me the truth. So, absolutely, if you can't feel safe that there's going to be no judgment, then you're not going to walk in the door. And that's what we want over and over, is to say, come in, give it a go, because you will not experience any sort of, oh my goodness, really? You don't know, and
Right.
you can't, and you haven't. The opposite of that. It's a human interaction where people generally are going to experience loads of caring,
Right.
loads of support, and loads of positive affirmation, support, and encouragement.
So once you negotiate, because it's about you and your schedule and your availabilities and so on, once you negotiate that first interface, that first meeting in one of the 3 locations, you get a 30-minute opportunity at no expense to sit down with someone from the firm, one of your colleagues. And if that, for whatever reason, turns out to be an interesting conversation, but I don't know that I could ever open up to that person. It's just, there was chemistry. It wasn't right. So then what happened?
Well, one of two things. One is that the client, the prospective client, can pick the phone up or send another email and say, can I meet someone else? Or a greater likelihood is that we'll be in touch in a day or two and say, how did that go?
Right.
Does that feel all right? Because again, it's a pretty tough spot for, very often we'll hear from our clients, prospective clients come into the consultation, and they say, I don't have my calendar, but it's really nice to meet you. I'll call back when I have my schedule.
Sure.
And it's very difficult, even though we do what we can to make it easy. It's very difficult for folks to say, you know what, I think you're wonderful, but I'm not sure you're my person.
Right.
So we do everything we can to make a follow-up call or email in the next couple of days to make sure that you got what you needed. And if you didn't, then we're going to offer, come on back and meet someone else.
Right, because maybe that encounter with a professional that it just didn't turn out to be the right person for you, that could be an excuse for never going back again.
Exactly.
Well, I tried that, and the guy was a jerk. So forget about that.
Yeah.
I'm tough. I can get by without that nonsense.
Yeah.
And off they go.
That's right.
Never to return.
No.
And
even if the person wasn't a jerk at all, but it just wasn't quite right.
Sure, of course.
I have so much compassion for that, because I think picking that phone up one time is hard. It's so hard. By the time folks get to that place, they've been thinking about it a long time.
I would agree with you. I think it's quite courageous.
Yeah.
I happen to believe that understanding your weaknesses is a strength.
True.
But not everyone agrees with me.
No.
And people go to quite elaborate lengths to disguise or conceal their weaknesses. But if you do finally get to the point where, okay, I've just had the biscuit. I know I need some help. So I'm going to send it. I'm going to go to that website. I heard that lady on the radio. She sounds super. I'm going to go to the website. I'm going to make a call. It's not even going to cost me anything.
Yeah.
So that decision and that moment of picking up the phone and going, okay, here goes. It's like jumping off a high diving board for the first time. Okay. Yes. And off you go.
Yeah.
But that's a very courageous act, because you're acting as your own agent, your own advocate, perhaps in many cases for the first time in a long while.
Yes.
So that is, it's a gutsy move.
It really is.
So if that first encounter isn't necessarily the perfect one, don't let that deter you.
Right.
Move on, come back, and you'll do the follow-up
and
anyway.
We do what we can to make it as easy as possible to try again.
Okay.
Yes.
At what point, Dawn, in this getting to know you scenario, after you okay, so I've had that meeting now. Maybe it took me a couple, but I've now met a person that I think I can really move somewhere with. Yeah. So then, how does it work? How do you determine now that you're okay with your counselor? How long, how many sessions will I need, over what frequency of time, over how many weeks, months, days, years, whatever? How does that happen?
That's such a great question, because it's one we get all the time. I think it's one of the things that stops folks from making that call the first time,
Because
the story is every week, or maybe twice a week, for goodness sakes, and probably for 2 or 3 years.
Right.
That's what I've seen on television. And what we have a very collaborative approach with our clients. Most problems, and I would, little air quotes there, most problems that folks come in to any clinic with, they can be managed in sort of 3 to 6 months of a session every couple of weeks.
Okay.
Right. So then we're looking at 6 to 12 sessions for most of the things that most of us are struggling with.
Okay.
There's some more historical challenges. Maybe I had really tough experiences growing up, or cumulative losses, if you will, through my formative years, or a series of dramatic life transitions kind of hit me all at once, where I may need longer term coaching and assistance. But again, we're looking at more intense contact to begin with, so maybe every couple of weeks for 3 to 6 months, and then every 3 weeks for another 3 to 6 months, and then once a month for 3 to 6 months, that kind of thing. So there's a lessening of intensity as you go.
So it's an on-demand kind of thing,
Yes.
too, isn't it? I mean, do people, when they go and engage in a counseling program and understand that it's going to take more than a half an hour here, it's likely to take a few weeks, maybe even a few months. But once they commit to that, then there's almost a peace of mind thing that kicks in. Okay, I understand now that it's not going to be resolved in 15 or 20 minutes or even a week or two. It's going to take a while because I'm pretty tied up in knots here.
Yes.
It's going to take a while to unravel me.
Well, and the number of times that we hear, how things change for the person between the time they made the phone call and when they show up for the free consultation.
I'll bet, yeah.
Just that action of self-care.
Sure.
And making that call and booking that appointment. Things begin to change right at that moment. And then there's it's a healing process, it's a growth process, it's a learning process. And you notice the word process at the end of each of those phrases, and it's a process.
Okay, we need to take a break here, but just before we go, you mentioned for most of the problems that most of us have, it's going to take probably anywhere from 3 to 6 months with any number of sessions in that time.
Right.
What are the issues that most of us have? And then we'll talk more about them after the break. But headline form, what are the things that bother most of us the most?
The 4 that we see the most in our clinic is anxiety, depression, relationships, and addiction.
Oh, in that order, in terms of numbers of people with.
I'm going to say very, very close to, yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
Anxiety and depression, numbers 1 and 2.
Yes.
We'll take those on, not necessarily in that order, because they're kind of a package deal, aren't they?
Yes, they're very related.
Our guest is the Clinical Services Director at JerichoCounselling, with 3 locations in Vancouver at 805 West Broadway, at Metrotown in Burnaby, and downtown at 510 Burrard Street, and, of course, online at JerichoCounselling.com. Terrific website. You might want to have a look while we take the following time out.
Celebrating the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CL 650.